to the show, friends. This is Anthony Brown, aka the Ghetto Practitioner, and you're listening to the podcast titled Care is Everywhere. Man, I'm super excited. Here we're going to talk about redemption, transformation, and the many ways God works through brokenness to bringing healing and hope. Today, folks, I'm super excited because I have a very, 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 very special guest on tonight. Somebody whose life story embodies redemption and recovery in a powerful way. He's a publisher, he's a counselor, he's an author. He's the founder of Writers in Treatment, the Real Recovery Film Festival, and the Addiction Recovery e-Bulletin. He's also the author of their memoir, High, From Cannabis to Clarity. Please welcome, ladies and gentlemen, Leonard Buschel.
Hello, Anthony. Good afternoon. How are you?
Good. How are you, Leonard?
Great.
It's good stuff, man. I haven't seen you in forever. Thank you for coming to the podcast.
When did you move out of California?
I've been out here almost 2 years.
Wow. How do you like it?
It's interesting, to say the least. But it's
like the times we live in.
Yes, indeed. You know, I'm allowed to leave the state now since I got my life in order.
Oh, good. Okay.
But I want the audience to hear about you and to capture you, Leonard. I know. I want to start with your backstory. I know you grew up in Philadelphia, and every time I hear or think about that sentence, I think about Fresh Prince and all that other stuff. But this is the real deal. And your journey took you from a world of substance use, even drug dealing, to eventually becoming a counselor and advocate for recovery. Can you share a little about those early years and what life was like for you before sobriety?
Well, I lived in a very stable neighborhood called Logan in Philadelphia. Anybody there would know about it. And we loved the Eagles. We loved the Phillies. None of my neighbors ever moved or got divorced. I went to the same elementary school, junior high school, basically with a lot of the same kids. And it was an idyllic time, I must say. No violence to speak of unless they were professional. In that case, they didn't want me because I didn't have any money. And I hung out at a candy store where I learned how to play the pinball machine, which might have been my first process addiction.
Okay.
Before that, I was addicted to Coca-Colas.
Okay.
And then I started playing the pinball machine. And two people can play, and when two people can play, you can gamble.
Oh.
So that's when my gambling habit started, which became quite accentuated over the years.
Okay.
So that was gambling. And I remember at one point I was only going to high school to 12th grade because I was selling football pools for a guy from South Philadelphia, if you know what I mean. I was selling football pools and I was selling marijuana. And that's how I was able to complete high school.
Oh, nice. A combined business venture. I like it.
And I had to hitchhike there every day. My family never had a car, so I hitchhiked to high school. My teachers all understood that if I was late, it's because I didn't get a ride right away. They were very understanding. And it got, and like I said, it was very interesting. And I had an older brother. And it was, my father, died when I was 3 weeks old.
Okay.
So I never had a male influence. I never had a father, basically. My mother, I think, did a pretty good job. And we were always provided for. We lived indoors. We always had meals. And I always went to school. We never had a car, so I grew up learning how to ride trains and buses. And luckily, back in the old days, there was good transportation.
Okay, so and that's cool. You come from, because I too was raised with a single mother. I never knew my father until I was 15 years old, and I got my first birth certificate. And even this day I still don't know who he is or whatever that may be. So it's fascinating how we have a lot of similarities. But I like that pinball addiction. Then all of a sudden it blossomed into something bigger and better. Love it, love it, love it.
There were times when I was in junior high. At lunch, I'd be out in the school or playground, and some friends would drive up and say, "Hey, we're going to the track. You want to come?" And I would just leave school. Because going to the racetrack, Garden State Park in New Jersey, was a lot more interesting than whatever was happening in the classroom. So I would just leave and go to the track and gamble a little, and that was exciting. I guess that was like the rush. And there's something special about, at that time, putting $100 on a horse to win. And from the time it leaves the post until it gets to the finish line, you're not thinking about dying. You're not thinking about sex. You're not thinking about the future. It's a very precious Zen-like moment. All you're doing is watching the colors on the horse, because all the horses have different colors. You're watching your color, and you're not thinking about mortality or anything. It's so wonderful. I haven't been to the track in a few years now, because I lost my gambling addiction when I lost my drug addiction, luckily.
Uh-huh.
That was a lucky break. But that was how it was growing up. Gambling, street sports, every day, football, stickball, halfball, every day.
And that's really fascinating. With most people I get on the podcast, we always talk about substance use or mental health or things like that. And you brought up a good point. Gambling is an addiction as well. And you get that rush and that feeling that, the way you describe all the little nuances, the colors, the noise.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and you start. Yeah, that's really interesting. And so, you've been very open. Huh?
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Anthony. I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
That's okay. You've been very open about the chaotic and risky life in those days. Looking back, what do you think kept you alive long enough to discover recovery?
Luck. Grace. Or not doing anything too stupid. The night before I went to high school, I was arrested.
Okay.
I was arrested in Philadelphia. There's a law called corner lounging.
Huh.
And I was arrested for corner lounging with my brother. They took us to jail. It was the first time I was ever handcuffed and in a prison cell or a jail cell.
Okay.
I remember, I was like 15, and I thought, oh, you really can't squeeze out of the bars. You're really in here.
Right.
My brother got out on his own recognizance, but I had to stay there till 3 a.m. until a local politician actually came to sign me out, because my mother was at a motel with her boyfriend. And so I got out at 3 a.m, not having slept on it. I didn't sleep in the cell. I stayed awake because it was interesting. First time in a jail cell. And I remember the next morning at school orientation, I'm sitting there thinking, I was just in jail for nothing. I don't trust anybody of any kind of the oppositional disorder maybe kicked in that.
Okay.
Like, literally, I was just in jail. I'm 15, and now they're trying to tell me what the rules are here. And it sort of didn't take. I'm glad I ended up graduating high school, but it probably started me off on my road of not believing the man, if you would.
Oh, okay. Can you use? You mentioned the term corner lounging. What exactly is that for those of us who are unfamiliar?
It's people hanging out on a street corner.
Oh, okay.
It's just people hanging out on a street corner.
Well,
and in Philadelphia, that was made illegal so they could control crowds, control people getting together for good or for bad. Don't know what exactly, but it was called corner lounging, and it was an excuse to arrest a bunch of people.
Wow. Wow. So just kicking it with, for lack of a better term, the homies, you get arrested just for being out there.
Because there were times on that street corner, there would be 30 guys hanging out, gamblers and neighbors, but the night I got arrested, it was just me and my brother. So that's what made it really ridiculous, that there wasn't a crowd. It was just me and my brother. And they came and they just maybe had nothing better to do and wanted to, get some good marks from the supervisor. I don't know why, but that's what happened. And in the end, it gave me a good story for my memoir, From Cannabis to Clarity.
Nice.
So I got to relive it a little, 40 years later.
Well, great. That's very interesting. And, going from playing pinball and doing ticket sales or whatever you call that, and marijuana, then you're hanging out, corner lounging, and you end up in the hooskow and you can't squeeze through the cell to get out, but your brother can get out, and all of that. Next thing you know, here we are fast tracking. You wrote a book about it. And we're going to get to that too, which is fantastic. At some point you made the shift from addiction to clarity. Other than the gambling and the marijuana, were you addicted to anything else?
I like to go to the movies a lot.
Okay.
I feel like how to go to the cinema at least once a week. That's a great escape.
Yeah.
Sitting in front of a big screen, that helps you get out of your mind. And it also can be educational, certainly entertaining. What else did I get addicted to? Well, actually, it was hashish.
Aha.
Hashish. Before marijuana, there was hashish. And that's what I was addicted to. In fact, when I was 20 years old, there was no hashish in Philadelphia. And I knew a lot of people. There was no hashish in Philadelphia or New York. And my friend Joe and we said, there's no hashish. And at the time, we were smoking red Lebanese hash. And we looked on the map and we said, hey, Lebanon is just north of Israel. There must be some hashish coming into Israel. Let's go. And so we dropped out of college to go to Israel to bring back hashish, which we did. And our families thought, they're going to discover their roots. We were just going to any length because we could not live a day without smoking hashish. And we went to Israel and we bought it and bought girdles the night before we left and stuck it in our pants and flew back into Kennedy. And thank God the dogs must have been at lunch when we landed. Because if we got popped there, that would have been years. So that was one of the most blessed days of my life. In fact, I did it again, like 6 weeks. Not 6 months. 6 months later, I went back and hired someone to smuggle it back into New York. Oh, and it was insane because if we get busted in Israel with hashish, they really take it seriously because God forbid you would be selling it to an Israeli soldier and he would end up missing shooting the Palestinian. So they didn't want their soldiers high at all. So it was really bad there, but we didn't get busted there. I didn't get busted anywhere. That's one of the miracles.
That is.
And I think when I had 7 years sober, I had a party for myself because I knew the statute of limitations was up. And I could tell these stories and not get arrested from something I did illegally, 7 years before. Everybody knows that, right? If we commit a crime, you don't get caught for 7 years, you can't get caught anymore. It's called the statute of limitations.
Okay.
So at 7 years sober, I thought, I can tell these stories.
Okay.
And yeah.
And so you're able.
Oh no, see that.
Okay. And so after all of that, was there a rock bottom moment, or was it more like a gradual realization?
Oh, I had a bottom.
Okay.
I had a bottom. For a while, I said, I was sort of riding the bottom for a while, or as you said, gradual. But I woke up one morning with the worst hangover ever. I got thinking, a Bloody Mary isn't going to solve this. Poison control can solve this. I was very, very sick. I'd been up most of the night. Won't tell you doing what. But I was also heavily into coke and ecstasy for a long time. But I got up and I had a massage scheduled that day for 11 o'clock. And I drove to the massage and I get on the table. And 5 minutes later, I said, her name was Penny. I said, Penny, I got to go outside for a second. I got up and I went outside and I threw up.
Yeah.
I thought, okay. I got back on the table. 10 minutes later, I said, Penny, I can't do this. And I went outside and I threw up again. And I started to go home. And at that moment, I started thinking, what's wrong with this picture? This is not why I moved to California. To not even be able to lay through a massage. It's not like I had like a physical labor or something stressful to do. I could not lay through a massage without getting up and throwing up.
Wow.
And that's when I start to see what's wrong with this. What's wrong with this picture? And on my way home, I had to stop at a phone booth where I spent a lot of my life as a drug dealer. And I was at the phone booth, and the only human being on planet Earth who I knew who had quit drinking and drugging saw me at the phone booth and came over and said, "Oh." And her name was Karen. I guess you could say like an angel.
Mm-hmm.
And she came over and said, "Hey, how you doing?" I said, "Okay," because I hadn't thrown up for 15 minutes. I'm already like feeling. And she said, "You don't look that good." And it was the month of July, and the sweat is flying off my head. It was up in Marin County, California. And she said, "You don't look so good." We talked for a little while. And then as she was leaving, I said, "By the way, did that rehab you went to have an 800 number?" And she said, "Yeah." And she wrote it down. And I went home and I saw somebody taking a picture of my house where I lived.
Okay.
And I thought, that's not good. I said, who could that be? It wasn't a realtor. Why, the house wasn't for sale. I was renting it. And some guy's taking, he looked like a cop.
Okay.
And all kinds of thoughts run through my head. I wait for him to leave. I go in and I pack up my suitcase and immediately split. Because I think for some reason the cops were coming back because I'd been dealing out of the house for like 6 years. And I went down to Big Sur. I went to a phone booth and I called the 800 number.
Okay.
And they said, okay, go. And they said, how do you plan to pay for this? I said, well, I have some Blue Cross insurance. They said, great, give us the numbers. If we don't take you, we'll find a hospital that will. And I said, a hospital? I'm not sick. I just need some R&R. He said, nevertheless. And I had a cell phone at the time, and the very next day, I'm at the bar at a place called Nepenthe, and they called, and they said, your insurance covers this 100%. And I just started crying hysterically, because I knew the jig was up.
Right.
I had no reason not to go. My son, who I was raising at the time, was with his mother for the summer. This was at the end of August, and I could go. This was at the end of July, and I could check in on August 3rd. So my sober date was August 4th, because, of course, I smoked a joint on the way there.
Well, of course.
I was going to stop for a drink on the way there, but I was late, and I'm a people pleaser, so I didn't want to be late. I was able to have my last joint on the way there, not my last drink, because, like I said, I just didn't stop. So that's, I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah.
That was the bottom, the incredible hangover, and realizing something was wrong with this picture. And 4 years before that, I was in the hospital dead. 2 days, North Hollywood Medical Center, dead. And they saved my life. I came to after a couple days. And that didn't get me to quit. That got me to switch from vodka to gin.
Ah, okay.
But that experience and just hearing that I could go to a rehab and I had no obligations that month just tore me up, and it saved my life completely. It was a miracle. The whole thing was miraculous. A, that I ran into Karen. B, that they took my insurance. And C, that I drove myself there. I drove there. Nobody had to take me. I was like, it was, and I didn't intend to get sober there. I just wanted to go for a month and get healthy again. And you had another question. Something to do with God?
Yes, yes. I mean, as for me, I believe God always has a way of bringing us back from the edge. And I was gonna ask you, do you see your survival and your path into recovery some kind of divine intervention? You touched a little bit on that. Can you expound some?
It was a miracle.
It was a miracle?
Because 2 days after going to a rehab, I called my brother in Philadelphia, my first and only phone call that I was allowed. I said, I can't stay here. They had the skulks, the AA steps on the wall, engraved in marble. I said, it's like every other line has got God in it. I said, I can't stay here. And he said, but you've been to the Wailing Wall in Israel. You've been to Zen monasteries in Japan. He said, give it a couple of days. See what, give it a couple of days. So I said, okay. So I didn't immediately leave because when I checked in, I had to give my car keys. They didn't know I had another set of car keys in my.
Of course.
I hadn't. They were flattened out when they used to have thin car keys. Now car keys are like gigantic. But anyway, that. So I could have left. The next day, I walked outside, and all desire for drugs left him.
Wow.
It took like a second and a half. But I walked outside and suddenly it was as if a hand, let's say the hand of God, why not, reached down into my toes and pulled out. This was after 26 years of doing drugs every single day of my life. 26 years of daily drug use. I did cocaine for 13 years. I gave it up because I realized you could snort ecstasy. But in this moment, all the drive, and I turned around to see if there was anybody watching, to see what the hell just happened. And I knew at that moment that I was relieved of drug addiction. It was mind-boggling. And I stayed at the rehab because I wasn't convinced that I could not drink. I never identified as an alcoholic. I was addicted to alcohol. I always had a flask with me in case I went someplace and all they had was beer or wine. Works too slow, so I always had a flask of vodka or tequila.
Of course.
So I wasn't always convinced. But then I went to a meeting. What did I hear at the meeting? I heard something. I should remember. I know it's in the book. And then I realized the bumper sticker that has kept me sober for 31 years, alcohol is a drug. And I'm a drug addict.
Okay.
So alcohol is a liquid drug. Mm-hmm. You can't chop it up, you can't shoot it, you can't snort it, but it's a drug. Probably the worst drug in America as far as people abusing it and dying from it. A lot more people dying from alcohol than heroin or even fentanyl. Because I published a newsletter. It's funny, I've been thinking I'm going to write an essay about how after 23 years of drug dealing, and it's all I did for 23 years, I now publish a newsletter called the Addiction Recovery E-Bulletin. We're in our 13th year right now. And every week there are 30 articles about addiction and recovery. And I have to compile those every week. So every week I have to read like 300 headlines and then decide which 30 stories I want to put in the newsletter. And it's sort of like karmically interesting that getting off of drugs after all these years, I'm still in the drug world. You know, I don't think it can kill me, but it sure can take up a lot of time and energy.
And we do appreciate, I know,
I'm going to say the person.
okay, I've seen that everywhere. I make sure that people will. And definitely good stuff, good stuff. And, you know, it's fascinating because that sort of segue us into the next question. One of the things that I really, really admire about you is how you turn your own struggles into something that helps others. Let's talk about a little bit of touch base on Writers in Treatment. What inspired you to create a nonprofit specifically to support artists and writers struggling with addiction? Okay. It looks like a car wreck.
Working as a drug counselor for a couple of years, and my clients did very well. I was on my way home one night at the corner of Venice and Robertson in Los Angeles, and a woman in a red SUV never even slowed down and T-boned me. And the car just flew across the street. Luckily, oncoming traffic that didn't hit me. I was able to open the door. A guy ran over to me and he said, "I saw the whole thing. If you weren't in a Volvo, you'd be dead."
Wow.
Because it hit me right in between the two doors. And the Volvos are one of the few cars that the frame is actually one piece. That's why he said if I wasn't in anything but a Volvo, I would have been dead.
Huh.
And so that's just a picture of. And I got out, and I felt okay. My son came down to get me, and he said, "Dad, maybe you should go to the hospital just to check, and in case you end up with a lawsuit, you can say you went to the hospital."
Right.
That's okay, that makes sense. I went to the local hospital, and I called the lawyer the next day and told them what happened. You know, the cops and everybody got her information, and we sued, and I ended up getting thousands of dollars in the settlement.
Okay.
$50,000. And at the time, I thought, what can I do with that to continue helping people? And I decided to start a nonprofit, which I did, a 501c3 called Writers in Treatment. We gave scholarships to people in the writing industry or even some up-and-coming writers. And we did calls, and we would pay the people to go to rehabs in Denver, in LA, and some other places. And that's what we did. And that's when we started the award show, the the Experience, Strength, and Hope Awards, where we would give an award, not a big deal, to a celebrity who wrote a book about their sobriety. I remember the second year was Lou Gossett Jr., God bless his soul. He had written a book about his, and then it was Buzz Aldrin, the guy who walked on the moon. He wrote a book about his addiction and his alcoholism. He showed up and gave the award, and then it was some other people, some actors and musicians. The bass player from Duran Duran wrote a book about his recovery, and that helped fund the Experience, Strength, and Hope Awards for 12 years, maybe 13 years. And that was great. And then, of course, the Real Recovery Film Festival, which is no longer mine. It belongs to somebody in Maine. We did that for a bunch of years all over the country, the Real Recovery Film Festival. You can Google it. But I also started this newsletter, the Addiction Recovery E-Bulletin, over 12 years ago, has 20,000 subscribers. There's also a website, addictionrecoveryebulletin.org.
Okay.
There's a Facebook page, obviously. because I'm old. I don't know how to do Instagram, but I do know Facebook. And hopefully some people will check it out, subscribe, share it. It's really interesting. It changes every week. Every week it's different, and that keeps it very vital.
Look at this. It's you. What? Wow, and that all launched everything, and that's really fascinating. You came,
Anybody in the passenger seat would have died. Anyway, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
yeah, it's really fascinating how the transition of your story. You came from, a youth playing around in school, hanging out on a corner, playing the pinball machines, getting involved in hash, flying over to a different country, and you come back, that you just hit that point, getting a massage, you got sick and tired of being tired and sick. And next thing you know, you end up in treatment and you get 4 months of sobriety. You're driving down the street in your Volvo. You get into this nasty car wreck and, wow, that's crazy.
That was her car.
Wow.
She never even slowed down.
And
It ran a red light and didn't slow down.
it's a matter of what it's your what's and from that you took the money and you started helping out people and everything. And man, I always knew about you because I've had some projects that you helped supported me on, which I really appreciate, but I never got this part of Leonard, and I appreciate this. And it's fascinating because I know you mentioned Real Recovery Film Festival, and I was beyond speechless when you accepted my little short film and I seen it on a big screen. I mean, for a guy who come from being homeless to be projected on a big screen because of your hands, I salute you.
I write the parallel between Park Bench to Park Place, cannabis to clarity.
Mm-hmm. It's remarkable.
He's remarkable, and I hope we talk about that on your own podcast once in a while.
Yes, I definitely will. Speaking of your memoir, High, From Cannabis to Clarity, in your memoir, you pull no punches, okay? It's raw, it's honest, but also it's full of hope. What was the hardest part about putting your story on paper?
Just taking the time, you do it on weekends. I would go to a cafe with my pen and my pad and just not edit. Sort of wipe out everything in pencil and then, give it a couple of days, read it over, tighten it up a little, trying to remember things, trying to remember how good it was and then how tragic it almost became. The tragic, it's the difficulty is not giving a shit. Just a picture of me in the hospital, almost dead.
Wow. Wow.
When I came to, what happened was I was staying with a friend in Studio City. We were up all night snorting coke and drinking Heineken. At 6 a.m, he said, let's go to bed. I went to my bedroom and I had a sudden, massive asthma attack brought on by the coke and the drinking. Suddenly, and I fell against his door. And luckily, he hadn't taken enough Valiums to be asleep. So he was still awake. He saw me, immediately called 911. And 2 days later, and I died. I had the experience of dying. It was the darkest, most horrible thing that's ever happened in my lifetime. I'm sure nothing worse can ever happen. I saw a darkness and a blackness that I can't even imagine. But luckily, I didn't see any white light. Because that would have meant I was gone. And I saw my son's DNA floating. I said, I have to go back. And I woke up in a hospital 2 days later. And the first voice I heard was my mother's, because they had taped my eyes shut, because when they give you certain drugs and morphine, your eyes pop open, so they have to take your eyes shut. So I thought I was blind because I couldn't see. And then I heard my mother's voice, and I go, fuck, she's in Philadelphia. Maybe I did die.
Yeah.
And I'm visiting her. And then they took the thing off, and there was my mother. They had called her in Philadelphia from the hospital and said, you better be on the next flight to Los Angeles because there's a 50-50 chance you're going to have to fly home with your son's body.
Wow.
Because they weren't sure I was going to make it. And I can't imagine a worse torture for a parent to be on a plane flight for 6 hours wondering if your child is going to be dead or alive when they get there. And, you know, the amends I made to her, you know, couldn't even compare to the suffering that she had to go through. But there she was sitting by the bed, and I was alive and I was awake. And that was the most horrible thing that's ever happened to me in life. And like I said, I apologized to her. She got to see me sober for 7 years before she passed away. Now, but that experience did not get me to stop using.
Right, right.
Also, the experience I talked about that made me go from vodka to gin.
Right.
And it didn't get me to stop using, but it was something unfathomable that I'm hoping no one has to go through. But I went through it, and it was, like I said, the darkest hour of my life. I'm sure death will be much more pleasant than what I went through.
Wow, that's powerful, man. That's deep, and it's really fascinating because you support writers, and I know I myself am a fairly new writer, and a lot of people ask me, well, a lot of people will say, well, I want to write a book, but I can't, and like you say, just sit down somewhere with a pen and a pad and just write it, just get real. And I know, looking deep, I'm pretty sure you discover when you start looking at your past, there's some regrets and there's some happiness, and there's a whole plethora of emotions that come up when you're writing a memoir about yourself. And, it's great. And you've done that with your book, which is fascinating. And I really encourage everybody to get high from cannabis to clarity. Now, as a writer to a reader,
Yeah.
what do you hope someone who picks up your book will walk away with?
I really had the intention when I wrote it for people who've been smoking pot for over 20 years to consider quit it. Because I think after 20 years, there's nothing you're going to learn from it anymore. I don't really think it's getting you high. I just think it's keeping your THC levels in your blood high enough to not to go into marijuana withdrawals, which aren't as serious as crack or heroin. Yeah, but it's awkward and it's uncomfortable and it's miserable. So that was my hope, that people who've been smoking for 20 years would think about quitting. It took me 26 years after I started to quit, but it's the greatest miracle or decision I've ever made. And I love that it's legal. Well, that's great. It's a wonderful drug for younger people, not 12-year-olds, but like 20-year-olds. It's fabulous, especially if it keeps you from drinking and driving. But after a time, you got to grow up at some point.
Right.
You really got to grow up. And I think not using pot can help you grow up right like that.
Okay.
It's fantastic.
Okay.
You can still keep drinking if drinking isn't your problem. Or if you're still doing that to yourself, I just think you missed the message from the marijuana, which was get high and then move on.
Okay. So you're not supposed to get stuck with the pipe or the paper or whatever it is that you invest in.
Yeah, even Bob Marley is no longer with us.
Right.
Not that the pot killed him, but as the symbol of a good high, he's not with us anymore. I went to Jamaica a couple times. Yes, it's great. If you're in your 20s and you want to go to Jamaica to get high, do it. But know that eventually you can't do it. You shouldn't. And as far as writing a memoir, it's not like you can't write a memoir. People won't write a memoir. There's nothing you can't do when it comes to a pencil and a piece of paper. You might not be able to climb Mount Everest. Yeah, that I can't do. But anybody can take a pencil and a notebook and write stuff.
Right. I agree with you. I agree with you 100%.
And with Amazon now, self-publishing, you don't have to find a big publisher. My brother wrote a memoir about Philadelphia. And so maybe I had a little competition in me. But if he could write a memoir, I could write a memoir.
Right. Okay, so let's get to this hope and redemption part that I really love. And so now that you've been sober for many years, how many years?
31.
Now that you've been sober for 31 years, and I know you help countless people along the way. For someone listening who may be struggling today, maybe feeling like they've gone too far, what's your message?
Yes.
Yeah.
Go to a meeting, go to a 12-step meeting, go to a rehab. Whether you can pay or not, you can get in somewhere. Try quitting for a month, see how it feels, and then decide whether you want to go back to it. My definition of addiction, like I said, I did cocaine every day for 13 years. I don't mean I missed a day. I had it in my coffin. You do that as a coke dealer. I never ran out. But it was the 13th year that I say I was an addict. Because the first 12 years, every time I did a line or a spoon, I did it because I wanted to. But it was that 13th year that I wake up on a Monday and say, I'm not going to get high until after dinner. Right after lunch, I'd be getting high. Or I'm not going to get high today. That never happened. And you do it anyway. And then you feel guilty. Then you feel bad. Because you're doing something you don't want to. And every time I did it for 12 years, I did it because I wanted to. But if you support people struggling, people who wake up and say, I'm not going to have a drink today, and then the next thing they know, they're at the bar or at the corner store, that's sort of like purgatory.
It is.
You're stuck. There are solutions. I was just thinking how miraculous it is that the court systems in America, when you're busted for a DUI, they sentence you to Alcoholics Anonymous. How unbelievable is that, considering Alcoholics Anonymous isn't really a thing? But the courts respect Alcoholics Anonymous enough to sentence people to go there. I know that because I was at a meeting today, and when you pass the basket, you'll see a white piece of paper in there. It's the court card.
It's the court card.
At the secretary signs, and the judge says, okay, you went to 12 meetings. It could be helpful.
Right.
It's been around for 75, 80 years now.
It's been around for a while.
It's and just coffee for nothing.
Oh, I like gluten-free stuff.
Sometimes there was actually muffins and shit. Go to AA, go to NA, Narcotics Anonymous. That's a powerful order. And there's CA. I went to CA for years. Cocaine Anonymous. They're there and they'll welcome you, and they want to know what you've been through. And if you haven't shared that with anybody, if that helps, you never know why AA even works. That I think it's the miraculousness of confession. You're confessing to somebody who understands where you're coming from. Very powerful. I don't speak for AA because I know that's against the traditions, but personally, I date it.
And I agree with you 100%. I don't speak for the organization, but for myself, something happened, and that was part of that something. And so, redemption is real. Leonard's story proves that no matter how far you've gone, there's always a way back, and God can use even the darkest chapters of our lives for good. Leonard, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your stories and your wisdom with us today. Listeners, please, I want you to go out, and I want them to follow your work. I want you to check out the Addiction Recovery e-bulletin. I want you to get Leonard's memoir, High from Cannabis to Clarity. Leonard, how else can people get a hold of you?
Facebook,
Facebook, okay.
Leonard Buschel, spelled just the way it sounds.
Okay, great. And again, I can speak personally on Leonard's character because I didn't know nothing about writing. I just, like Leonard suggested, just put it down and toss it out to the wind and let God do whatever God's going to do. And I crossed paths with Leonard. He supported my book. I've been on the Recovery e-bulletin. I've been in the Recovery e-bulletin. Leonard blessed me with sharing my short film at the film festival. He's the real deal, folks. So again, I want you all to go to the Addiction Recovery e-bulletin site, get yourself some good stuff to read, pick up Leonard's book, High from Cannabis to Clarity. Yeah, and for all you listening, remember, redemption is not just possible, it's a promise. So until the next time, stay encouraged, stay strong, and stay rooted in hope. Until then, this is Anthony Brown, a ghetto practitioner. Leonard, our guest, thank you very much, and I'll see you all the next time.